Shalom, everyone. Now I'll read in English the message that Alejandro Alvarado brought to us this week on Parashat Tetzaveh. In this parasha, we repeatedly find the idea of Kedusha, holiness. Exodus 28, 2-4 addresses holy garments. Chapter 29, 43 and 44, the consecrated service to God is spoken of as holy. In chapter 28, 36, the plaque on Aaron, the high priest's forehead, would read, Kodesh le'Adonai, holy to God. In chapter 29, 33-37, the altar and the offerings were also called Kedoshim, holy, as well as in chapter 30, verse 10, the Holy of Holies inside the tent of meeting. In short, the principle of Kadosh is clearly present in this parasha. So what does Kadosh, holy, mean? Kedusha, which in Hebrew means holiness, is related to the action of separating or dedicating, and is also seen in the root of the verb lehakdish, which means to separate or to dedicate, whether it be an animal offered to God or an individual or a group of individuals set apart and dedicated for a specific function. Kedusha is often used to describe God, as well as the earthly items that are considered sacred. It's also often used to refer to the name of a prayer in Judaism that describes God's holiness. When Kadosh refers to a specific physical space or time, the intention is to define something that is separate and dedicated to for a specific goal. For example, the biblical festivals, the Moedim, are the spiritual times that are Kadosh. The Kodesh HaKadoshim, the innermost place of the Bet HaMikdosh, the tent of meeting, is where only the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, would enter once a year on Yom Kippur, as part of his service on that special day. The word holy can be applied to anything directly related to God. For example, the items used to worship him, such as the holy utensils used in the temple in Jerusalem that we read in 1 Kings 8:4. The Torah also speaks of holy places, such as the ground where Moses approached the burning bush in Exodus 3, 2-5. Or the assemblies where we celebrate the Moedim, the feasts each year, as we read in Leviticus 23:39. In this same sense, biblical Judaism is interested in sanctifying matter, the Hagdesh et HaChomer, so that we can add spiritual content to our lives by changing the abstract idea of holiness into something concrete, which will help guide us during our temporary stay on earth. Kedusha, sacredness or sanctity, is to show that the Almighty is infinitely kind, the attribute through which man can establish a greater closeness with him and presenting him as the sole sovereign of the universe. Things in this earthly world can only obtain sanctity when they receive it from God himself, when they become a reflection of God through his quality of giving. Since we cannot have absolute holiness, the only way we can access it is by becoming a vessel of his divine holiness. When we understand ourselves to be finite, we can then turn to God in search of holiness. Sacred things are separated from the mundane when they move away from everything that does not reflect his divine plan and attributes. The sacred moves away from that which is not eternal. For example, Shabbat is holy because it's the only day of the week when we fully accept God's sovereignty over the world. We do not work to earn a living as we do on the other days of the week. However, that doesn't mean that we abstain from eating or drinking or other physical pleasures, as they are part of how we receive divine goodness. There's nothing created by God that is antithetical to pleasure and living. However, the work of man contains elements that are not eternal. The dependence of man upon the material world began at the Garden of Eden, when to reign over physical matter, man had to first work for it. On Shabbat, we overcome our dependence upon the material and receive only from God that day. Holiness in this world is not beyond our reach. It is in the environment around us and within ourselves. Everything created has at least a bit of sanctity in it, or it couldn't exist. The concept of holiness, Kedusha, must be understood within the context of our spirit and our body being one, and should not be considered separate compartments of life. And that spirituality must permeate our entire existence. Worshiping and serving God refers to our actions, which celebrate the work of the Creator among men. Every act of life, every gesture can enter the realm of the sacred when there is the awareness of the ever-present relationship between us and God. God is everywhere, not only because he is omniscient, but because we carry him wherever we exert influence through our actions. Thus, Kedusha is constantly materializing through our practical actions throughout each day of our lives. Within the sacred, which can coexist even with the profane, the concept of the election of the people of Israel emerges. It can be an historical model of Kedusha, as Israel was called, separated, to form a kingdom of priests, a holy people, as we read in Exodus 19:6. The Torah presents Israel as having been chosen. But this is not to be understood as being privileged in relation to other peoples. The chosen people means a people to whom God has drawn near and who he has set apart for a purpose. In the words of Rabbi and philosopher Abraham Heschel, the meaning of the term election is understood in relation to God and not in relation to other peoples. It does not refer to an inherent quality of the Jewish people, but to a relationship that exists between God and that people. The good cannot exist without the sacred. In fact, the good things were created in the first 6 days, but the seventh day was proclaimed by God as Kadosh, holy. In the final analysis, it is God who attributes the potential for sacredness to things, and it is man who is called to take them to their maximum moral potential on this earth. There are things whose potential is eternal, and other things for which man has the power to empty of that sacredness and destroy. However, it's in our hands to assure that everything created fulfills its role on this earth and reflects the divine immanence and transcendence. Among the holy things mentioned in this parasha, we find the priestly garments, which are described in detail. There's a popular saying that the robe does not make the monk, which refers to the fact that what you see on the outside does not necessarily reflect what is on the inside. So why did God mandate such special clothing for the priests? It is to teach us that there must be balance between who we are on the inside and who we are on the outside, as depicted in the breastplate, the ephod, which had 12 precious stones arranged equidistant from each other. Each had to occupy a very specific place, and each represented one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The high priest was dressed majestically, which made him look like someone special, someone of high rank. But at the same time, the high priest could not lose focus on his mission. He needed to be humble. Humility is recognizing his place. Humility is recognizing our place. The high priest was neither a superior nor an inferior being. He simply recognized his role. It's important to not take anyone else's place while also not neglecting our own. Humility is also occupying one's place while allowing the other to occupy theirs. That balance is extremely important. Lack of humility is due to an excessive ego. The excess of humility makes us tend to disappear and abandon our role, leaving the space that we were to fill empty. Each stone had to occupy its corresponding place in the ephod, the breastplate, and not any other. So how do we do this today? By using the talents or talent that we have been given as our responsibility toward others. When the people saw the ephod that the Kohen Gadol wore, they were reminded that each tribe represented there had a specific place. This applies to each one of us. Occupying a place that does not correspond to me, exercising a role that does not correspond to me has consequences, as well as not exercising the role or not occupying the place, the space that was assigned specifically for me. How can I fulfill my role? By utilizing my talents to serve others. When I do this, I achieve the balance between what is seen and what is not seen within me, between my outer garments and my interior. That is why action is so important, and not just thinking about doing something. Both are required, but both must be in sync. Each of us has the obligation to improve ourselves and to fulfill our task of participating in improving the world and being God's partner in building a better society. It's true that we often can't reach that desired level, but the important thing is to know that we can always make the decision to start over. What is already done cannot always be undone. However, there is always the possibility of beginning again, always the possibility of beginning again. That's the meaning of teshuvah, the return to the right path. What is important is our decision, the actions that we take, our kavanah, our intention. You shall be holy, for I am holy, Elohim your God, it says in Leviticus 19, finds its most explicit meaning when we become aware that we are eternal in the image, and when we are created in the image of the eternal. This possibility with which we approach the qualities of the eternal in the moral conduct that gives us the possibility of evolving to increase our good qualities and lessen our bad ones. This way, we feel that we can and we must help the eternal in the renewal of the world. Shabbat Shalom.